Hey everyone, welcome to this week's Tech Corner. I've got an awesome show coming up right now. If you have not subscribed to the CyberHub podcast, please make sure to do so. Right now, give us a 5-star rating if you're listening on your favorite podcast listening platform. If you're watching us on YouTube, please make sure to subscribe. You're going to want to catch the whole episode today. Joining me in just a moment is Erich Kron, who's a security evangelist over at KnowBe4. We're going to be talking about the Kaseya breach. Who's to blame? So join us here in just a moment. Let's get started with this week's Tech Corner, folks. Here we go.
From the CyberHub bunker and studio, you're tuning in to the CyberHub podcast, Tech Corner. And now, join me in welcoming your host and CISO, James Azar.
You know, you could totally shred that guitar, Erich.
Yeah, totally. Like I have that kind of skills, right? I'm the most unmusical person you've ever wanted to meet. So,
although the beard would not make you like, I could totally see you just with a guitar, like, you know, just jamming out.
Right. I need more hair around here, though. I don't know.
Need a little bit more. Yeah, it's all right, man. How's it going, buddy?
Man, it's going pretty good. I mean, you know, it is what it is. The world is doing what it's doing. We all have a job, and here we are.
Here we are. So happy Friday to everyone tuning in. If you're listening when the show is live or as it's published, it's Friday. So happy Friday. If you're listening after the fact, happy whatever day of the week it is to you. But Erich and I are going to talk about Kaseya. Now, we came up with a bunch of different topics to talk about. We decided to settle in on Kaseya, who's to blame. And one, we kind of wanted to address the whole idea of clickbait, right? But for those that have maybe been sleeping from July 2nd to today, Erich, let's give them a little kind of 30-second taste of what is Kaseya and why are we dedicating an episode to it.
So we have somebody that develops tools that a lot of MSPs use, and it went badly for them. Basically, you know, in a very small scale, the SolarWinds type of thing, tools, infection, spread out to other people, and now it's news. Is that concise enough?
Yeah, $70 million, what they asked for. Then they were so kind to go down to 50 mil. You know, I was waiting for them to go down to 30, 10, 5, 2.5.
Slashing prices.
Slash.
Right?
Right, like a used car salesman. It's not $10,000. It's $8,000. Wait, 8? That's not enough. $6,000 if you come right now. Call the 800 number right. You haven't called? You still haven't? Here you go. It's $4,000. Let's go.
Yeah, see, they messed up by not throwing in a free cruise. But you
or
know,
a free trip to Russia.
Yeah, there you go.
Pay us $50 million and come to Mother Russia. We show you very good time in Russia.
So yeah, you know,
best club in Moscow. Best club.
This thing, you do that well, man. This thing is, you know, it's just another kind of like light on the whole supply chain thing.
Right.
And the supply chain from people that are developing tools that are being used by other people, all the way down to the supply chain of MSPs who you've given, you know, rights into your network and you trust wholly and hope that they do you well. But sometimes even through things that are somewhat out of their control, things go badly. And I think that's, to me, that's my takeaway from this very much is we're seeing this kind of thing happen again. You know, we saw software SolarWinds. We see this happening here. It's not necessarily the Kaseya's fault per se, if you will. These attacks are going to continue to happen. The MSPs are going to continue to use these tools. But this is a danger that organizations who use the services of MSPs and MSSPs really need to keep in mind, is that that's a threat vector for you. That's every much a threat to you as an internal employee would be that has access to your systems. And we gotta think about it that way.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, with the people who are comparing Kaseya to SolarWinds have no clue what they're talking about. At the slightest.
You mean like impact-wise?
Impact-wise, size-wise.
Yeah.
You know, here's the deal. Equifax impacted 149 million people, just about, and about another 20 million organizations. Fair? More or less 100 and 70 million victims, rounding up. Okay. That was massive.
Yeah.
Because the data was massive. All of that breach was massive in nature. But if we go to SolarWinds didn't have the numbers, but the quality.
Yeah.
It was all government. It was all major organizations. And it was all companies that did business with Fortune 500s, right? One of which being Microsoft, the other one being FireEye, right? Within our industry.
Yeah.
Right. Of the companies that we know that were impacted by SolarWinds, there were plenty more that came after that said we were also impacted by SolarWinds, but we won't go down that path. It feels like to me there was a clickbait in the whole headline for Kaseya to get people really kind of on a 4th of July weekend when everyone was ready to just, peace out, go lay out on the beach or at the lake or, go on their vacation with their family after a year and a half of just nonstop, one crisis after the other, adjusting to dealing with a global pandemic and all these different things. And it's a bit irresponsible, right? Because Kaseya did not have the same impact. It impacted MSPs and MSSPs, MSPs predominantly. Most of those MSPs served small to mid-sized companies. 30% of them didn't belong in the business to begin with. Right? Yeah. And this wasn't a coordinated nation state attack. This was a pure disruption type of attack that was financially motivated.
Yeah. Hey, so when this broke, I was in the Bahamas minding my own business on my vacation, and I paid no attention to this thing until I got back, and very much to your point, I had the benefit of ignoring it for a while, coming back and looking at some of the after stuff, right? So I wasn't necessarily caught up in the Twitter storms or whatever, was going on with the initial stuff. I was fat, dumb, and happy in my little beach down there. But looking back on it, I agree with you. It's certainly not the same scale or impact or any of that stuff that we saw with SolarWinds. SolarWinds was a whole different setup. I mean, the fact that it went after significant entities like government entities, and the fact that it was nation state run, and it was really, really craftily done. This was high quality, super crafty nation state, holy crap, spy type, type stuff, right? That was significant for sure. This does, in fact, have a lower standard for all of that. Okay. Mm-hmm. And yeah, you're right. It's hitting MSPs, and MSPs, they manage smaller organizations a lot of times, right? That was typically our clientele. So I was a technical services manager at an MSP for a while back in Arizona. And when I did that, that was our clientele. It was doctors' offices. It was, smaller businesses didn't have their own in-house or needed to augment or something like that. Okay. So that's very true. But we also got to consider the sheer volume of small, medium businesses that are here in the country. I think 98 or 99% plus of companies in the US are small business. And, a lot of them use these services. Was it critical? No, but it is a wake-up call. Once again, if you're going to be using services like this, we need to have some ways to essentially help people make better risk decisions with this and understand what could happen when you give somebody access to your organization like MSPs have.
Well, I mean, let's not go blaming the smaller companies who hire these organizations.
Oh.
Right? Without really full knowledge of asking them, oh, you use Kaseya? Well, Kaseya isn't safe, right? Yeah. Most of the end users had no clue who the MSP used until they saw the disruption. And when they saw the disruption, the MSP tried to pass the buck up. But if the MSP didn't include traditional backups on any of those plans, those customers are now looking elsewhere, right? Because the first thing that customer looked was, well, couldn't we back up our systems? What do you mean you don't do backups? Or you only did backups every 3 months. Well, that's the package you selected, Mr. Customer. Well, why didn't you advise me any better?
Right.
I mean, and it takes sometimes learning from these kinds of mistakes for small businesses to really wake up and start addressing the whole idea of having some IT hygiene, not even cyber hygiene, but just having backups, right? Which seems so simple, yet so many people don't do it.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't lay any of the blame on the impacted organizations downstream. All I'm saying is they don't know. And I don't know that they have a great way to find out the right questions to ask. You know, when I do some of these talks, I have people ask me, well, what do I need to know about an MSP? Like, what should I be asking them? You know, and the simple things like, hey, does everyone share the same password for your organization? There's a lot of MSPs out there that still do that crap, right? Because you mentioned it, 30% of them shouldn't even be in business. And I hate to say it, but there's a lot of these little small ones that somebody once assembled a computer and was able to fix their grandma's internet connection. And all of a sudden, they feel like they can either be an independent person going around fixing stuff, or worst case scenario, they find somebody to back them into making an MSP. And there's some significant stuff when you take that amount of responsibility on your organization, which is having these rights, having these tools that can get in and do stuff all day long. There's some significant things that have to happen there that a lot of them don't do, but what we need to do is, again, what I'm saying is we need to educate those folks to what questions to ask when you're in the small, medium business and you're going out and you're shopping for an MSP or an MSSP. That's all.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about kind of the whole, not only the education aspect of MSSPs and MSSPs, but also the responsibilities that go along with this kind of stuff. If I'm a doctor's office, is it legitimate to expect me to know how to hire an MSP or MSSP and know what tools they use, and are those the right tools, and are they employing the right strategies? And this is kind of where we're between a rock and a hard place, right? So here's the rock and the hard place. How do you create an MSSP, right? How do you create one? Anyone can open an MSSP or an MSP, right? I mean, it's not like being a doctor. You got to pass, you got to get your medical license. It's not like a lawyer where you have to pass the bar.
It's not like an electrician or somebody that wants to build a wall, and an add-on to your house that has to be licensed or fall under those sorts of things. There's none of that.
Right. So you end up in a position where anyone can open this business, and that's part of capitalism. That's part of freedom of being able to go about and start any company you so wish to desire. I mean, Carnegie didn't exactly know a lot about steel when he started steel. He just understood that he could make steel, and so he just did that. I mean, the same applies across a lot of different people in that aspect. So the Kaseya from that perspective, to me, the only thing that the victims learned is that we need backups. And that could be the best lesson come out of it, right? Yeah. Is backup, maybe switch to the cloud and not be so reliant on, on-prem servers that sit in an MSP or communicate. A lot of MSPs still want to have the server because part of it is control of the customer, right? You get to kind of lay out to the customer what you want and don't want to do. And make sure that you still have their data. It's
well, this isn't the first time we've seen an MSP go wrong, with like ransomware type of things. This happened a while back, and I forget the name of the MSP, but basically the gist of it was 70% of their customers ended up paying the ransom for 70% of their customers because the backups were also encrypted. They got into the MSP, they used the MSP to then attack and dump ransomware on their customers. And so 30% of them, as I understand, had an offline backup they were able to go to. And they did it, and they were even fortunate in that this didn't seem to be one where they sat there for quite some time and started dropping tools and made persistence and all that. They kind of got in and hammered it. But the MSP still had to pay for 70% of their customers to get their data back. And we all know that's not a pretty thing. That takes time. There's outages. And do you trust that data? There's data corruption that happens. There's all that kind of stuff that happens when you're dealing with this sort of thing. And as an MSP, from an MSP side, how many of those customers that you just basically, they're looking at you and said the ransomware comes from you, how many of them are going to renew with you? How many of them are going to stay with you and want to continue with your services after you've just cost them a week offline or more?
Yeah. And again, that's kind of what the bottom line of Kaseya is. The bottom line of Kaseya isn't 0 days, because I think what's really important to understand is 0 days are going to be around until we find the balance between human and technology to address gaps in software development.
Yeah, they're not going anywhere. It's there. But the truth of the fact is, most of the stuff that gets exploited isn't 0 days.
No, it's traditional vulnerabilities.
Yeah, stuff that's been around for a while. Yeah.
But with Kaseya specifically, you know, we see these vulnerabilities, we see these 0 days. Yeah. And with 0 days, there's very little, you know, when people say, well, how do we stop it? I was watching a bunch of pundits go in the media and talk about how you can stop 0 days. And a lot of them were selling some sort of, you know, some of them, yeah, snake oil. I in turn commented that I've got a bridge in Brooklyn to sell if anyone's interested, right?
Yeah.
Because that solves all of the world's problems as well if you just buy the bridge from me. But at the same time, we look at that and we go, we're failing to really deliver on the message that we need to deliver on. And the message that we need to deliver on is the following. There are multiple challenges when it comes to 0 days on software. Multiple. Not one, not two, not three. There's a bunch of them. All of these challenges come down to two things, okay? One is the fact that some code that we still use to today is 20 or 30 years old. And with the digital transformation and adoption, where unless you go back and fix it, you're not gonna not have them. Mm-hmm. Number two, humans are mistake prone, and because humans write code's gonna be mistake prone based on humans, even the newest stuff.
Absolutely.
And so we can't eliminate 0 days. That's not a possibility. Right now, today, maybe 10 years from now, maybe when we have true AI and AI has a good enough library and it's written in a smart way that it identifies that. And even then, what people don't understand about AI and artificial intelligence is it's only as good as it learns from the person who wrote the model. And so, you know, if someone wrote a bad model, then by all means, that AI is not going to be very smart.
Well, and it's got to also understand all of the contributing factors, right? So, you know, 0 days, it may be in these certain circumstances, right, that this becomes an issue because you're running this and it has this on it and so on and so forth. There's these things that run through different areas. And the AAs, I don't think we're ever going to be done with them, honestly. I frankly don't. 10 years from now or not, I think we're still going to have these issues. And some of it's thinking outside the box and thinking different ways and going, oh, well, what if I did this? You know, what if I entered this string? What would happen, right? That's the kind of stuff that you know, I honestly think we're going to have 0 days forever. Now, what's interesting, I'm going to throw this one at you. What if we made a giant government-run database of all the 0 days that we held on to until we were able to patch them, right? Did you see that China is doing that? Did you see that they're talking about holding vulnerabilities like that?
A law to do that?
Yeah. Can you imagine how valuable that particular database would be and how much of a target that information is going to be for others, right? So I don't think that's the right way to go about it either. You know, I'm being a little snarky there, but I don't think that's the right way to go about it either. One of the biggest things that bothers me that I see these days, especially when it comes to 0 days or newly found vulnerabilities, is how many times have we heard the story that so-and-so suffered a data breach or this and that went wrong, yet some security researcher had reached out and told them about this exposed S3 bucket or something like that. They were told about it, and either they don't have the process to deal with something like that, or they don't believe them, or they don't do crap about it until it ends up hitting the news. That's the kind of stuff I think we really need to improve on, is how do we report this kind of stuff securely and in a reasonable way? And organizations need to take it to heart and have a process to deal with it. When somebody knocks on your door and says, hey, if I do this, this happens, they need to be able to respond to that.
Yeah, I mean, so agreed. I just don't know that a government database would work.
No, I don't think so. Yeah, like I said, I was being snarky about that. I think it's amazing that China is doing this, and they're throwing this.
China just made it illegal for security researchers to disclose outside of China any 0 days or sell them. So, sometimes a Chinese researcher would find a 0 day within a Chinese org and sell it to the NSA. So the NSA could take advantage of it. And so China's like, no, you can no longer do that. And that's fine. I mean, I don't know that the US would ever do the same. I know that we're trying to block US university research from being able to go into China. That's going to become a crime here momentarily. But that's about that. I think when you look overall on Kaseya, and if we were to wrap it all up here beautifully in a bow, right? Kaseya was a crime of opportunity done by human error. The ultimate victims of that crime is going to be the end customer who had no idea what they were buying. Like most people who buy stuff who they have no expertise in knowing what they're buying. And we do that in every aspect of our lives. Everyone fell on the first car they ever bought unless they were a mechanic. Everyone did. We've all at least bought at one point or another in our lives a car which someone told us X and it did not do X, it did Y, and we were stuck with it. Right?
Yeah.
We've all go ahead.
Well, I can't even fault the MSPs in the middle for that. Like I don't even know where to lay blame on this, if there is blame to be laid, right? It's a combination of things, because the MSPs have to trust that their tools are good, right? And they're not maliciously going out and throwing this stuff in there because this was an error that came down on a vulnerable tool, et cetera, et cetera. At what point do we lay some sort of blame on somebody, or do we not and just say, hey, this is something we can all learn from?
Yeah, I don't think there's blame to lay here, right? And I know that seems very, like not taking a position, but there really isn't. This wasn't done the only negligence I think that existed in this case is anyone who didn't have backups for their customers because their customers wouldn't pay them money for backups, right? I think if you're an MSP or an Mssp, backup should be part of your standard service, right? It should be no different. When you go to get an oil change, no one says, hey, it's a $20 oil change, doesn't include the filter. Include the oil filter and the oil change.
Yeah, there's some interesting things that happen, though, because not everybody has money, right? And so, yes, backups should definitely be there. But, my uncle used to own a Mercedes-Benz dealer or repair place. He dealt with exotics and Mercedes and Alfa Romeo and all these kind of, European cars. But he started off working on Volkswagens. And he said the big difference that he found was people that had Mercedes, if you said, you know what, your belt here was about to come apart on you and I replaced it, they go, oh, thank you for doing that. But on a Volkswagen, if you replace the belt that cools the engine and runs the alternator and everything else, and you don't get their pre-approval, they're like, I don't have this much money. Why are you trying to stick me with this, right? There's that kind of thing where sometimes it's a bigger deal to other people. We can stand back and we can look and we say, oh, you absolutely should have to do that. But for some organizations, they may be making the call to say, you know what, I can't afford that particular service. And let's face it, backups aren't necessarily, they're not difficult, and space isn't even that big a deal these days, but they are still a challenge, making sure that all works. And there's a lot of time and effort that goes into that if you're going to do it right, to ensure that your backups are good, to do the testing you really need to be doing. It is pretty intensive.
Yeah, I mean, it's to me that's the most. It's backups are labor intensive, but there's ways to streamline that process.
Mm-hmm.
right? There's technology that's out there. I think if you want to go into a business and you want to be able to give the best service for the dollar, then you would find a way to do that. Everything else to me is just I don't know, Eric. I don't know, brother.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is, the customer has the right to choose and should have the right to choose, assuming they're educated correctly.
You're assuming.
Well, yeah. But I mean, that's part of it is you educate them. Hey, look, backups are a big deal, but I don't think MSPs should be expected just to throw it in.
I think backups should be something MSPs throw in. I think it should be standard. I think it should be part of, any contract that you do. Because at the end of the day, that cost is how you retain your customer when something bad happens. I mean, the idea of backups to me is so basic, is so elementary.
And here's where I kind of think about this is, at least in the area I was, a lot of times we augmented staff. They may already have their own backup solutions in place within the organization. We augmented staff for other things in a lot of cases as an MSP, or just help them pick up the other pieces. So what about those that already have a backup in place, right? What do we do with those? Where you aren't the whole IT department, but maybe you're that half an FTE or a quarter FTE they need just to make sure that everything's holding together, right? This is where I have this is where I think that the choices could be made.
I can second that briefly. I still think that MSPs should offer backups as a standard. And I know that's difficult, and I know that I get what you're saying, and I appreciate what you're saying, but it's like I said, it's like going to a car dealership and getting an oil change, and the car dealership telling you, yeah, it's like buying a car without a spare tire.
Mine didn't come with one.
What kind of car did you buy, Eric?
No, it comes with. There's a lot of them these days. They come with a pump in the back and a can of Fix-A-Flat, man. So we'll work on that analogy. But here's the thing: you go to get your oil changed at a dealership now. They're not going to charge you for the filter, but there's like an extra $2 charge for shop materials, which are like the towels, the paper towels they use and stuff like that, man. So I mean, we can talk.
Times are rough right here, man. Inflation is high.
It's brutal. The last time I took my car to a shop and I'm like, what's this $4 charge for? Oh, like the shop towels and stuff. I'm like, come on, man. It's just, anyways, that's a whole nother subject. But yeah, we can agree to kind of disagree on that one, I guess. I do think it's something that they should definitely push. And if there's an organization that doesn't have it, they need to know what the risks are, especially in ransomware days, right? It's more than just, it used to be that we had backups for major events gone wrong, restoring data somebody accidentally deleted, or if a machine explodes on you, or there's a natural disaster that wipes stuff out, right? And that was a different time. Now, though, it is such an important thing because of the malicious actions that are going on around there that I agree everybody should definitely be doing backups, and they should be doing them right. Again, who has the onus on that? I don't know.
Yeah, it's okay to agree to disagree. We've got about 10 minutes left, and we've hammered Kaseya, but this week NSO's been in the news, right? And that to me is another one of those things where people are mad over something that someone makes, and they're mad about the person who made it, not the person who uses it.
I could agree with that. So what we're talking about here is some pretty significant surveillance tools, right? Things that can be dropped on phones and grab all kinds of wonderful information. We know this stuff is out there. There's no doubt about it, right? This is kind of at the level of the Jason Bourne type stuff. I mean, it's up there in complexity, and this is the good stuff, right? But you're right. It's not necessarily it's not on the manufacturer. Like, you created this thing, right? It comes down to who's purchasing it. The questions being, who says it's okay to purchase this and use it, right? Because we all know that, they say it's to be used against criminals and terrorists and all that, but one person's terrorist is another freedom fighter, right? If you look at it from that angle.
Yep.
So somebody's got to make that decision, and who eventually does that? Who's in the game? Now, I think you have a little bit insight in that, right?
Yeah, I mean, so I don't want to go too deep into what I know, simply because I'm not permitted to really speak about a lot of it. But I will say this: NSO Group is a cybersecurity company, like many others.
Mm-hmm.
The only difference between, let's say, them and Palo Alto is one's defense, one's offense. Okay, so let's keep that definition there. Now, in Israel, like in the US, anytime you create any offensive weapon, no matter what it is, right? It can be encryption, it can be a gun, it can be a missile, it can be a tank, an airplane, a jet engine, anything that would be considered offensive. There are ITAR rules, meaning international trade rules, about you selling that specific product or technology outside of your nation state, right? So in NSO's case, they get permission from the Israeli government to sell that technology outside of Israel to all kinds of different governments. And that's authorized by the Ministry of Defense in Israel. Right?
Yeah.
So
it's not like you just go onto Amazon and buy yourself this kit to go throw at people, right?
Right. You don't go to RSA, meet NSO at one of the side booths over there in the corner and go, hey, you got offensive tools? Great, let me buy it. There's also a process by which they internally vet their customers, so they don't sell. So if Eric and I started a company and we called it James and Eric Incorporated, and we reached out to NSO and said, hey, we'd love to buy your Pegasus tool, they'd be like, who the hell are you guys and why would you want it? What are you going to use it for? And we're sorry, we can't sell it to you.
Yeah.
Now, when a government gets their hands on an NSO tool, they're buying it as part of a greater defense tool. How they use it thereafter is at the discretion of that government.
Right.
So
yeah, and I mean that's important there. Now the question is, again, one person's terrorist is another freedom fighter. This has apparently been used to target people, reporters and journalists, and I think that's where a lot of the heat comes. I mean, journalists don't like being targeted for this, and rightfully so.
I didn't see the outrage when the NSA spotted on Tucker Carlson a few weeks ago. I didn't see the same outrage that I'm seeing with Pegasus right now.
Well, maybe it's because we expect the NSA to be spying on everybody, but
Tucker Carlson's a journalist.
Yeah. No, and I do think that's a pretty hot topic when journalists are being spied on. Now, this is this feels super like Jason Bourne spy stuff, because some of it is, okay? And so there's that allure to that right there. That alone is going to sell the story.
Here's the thing about the governments that actually used this technology, right? A predominant amount of them are considered to be rogue regimes in the manner that they don't support Western values of open communication and democracy.
Right.
Let's kind of keep that in mind as being some of that. So when a journalist from a country that is doesn't have the same rules of freedom of press that the US does or some of the Western world does, and those countries get their hands on Pegasus and use it against journalists, we can't necessarily blame the NSO group for it.
No, I agree. They make a tool, just like, if I buy a Stanley hammer at the local hardware store and I go smash a window out of a car, it's not Stanley hammer manufacturer's fault that I use the tool in that way. Now, there are we obviously have laws against certain things, and then we have to think of this kind of as a weapon. It's a cyber weapon. Okay, so how do we handle weapons in different countries with respect to this? I'll tell you right now, our local Publix grocery store down here, someone who's under 18 can't go buy a kitchen knife there. I've actually seen people get carded to buy just like a kitchen knife. Nope, can't sell that to you because it's a quote unquote weapon, right? It's always been a tough thing to figure out how to deal with this sort of stuff, regardless. But here we have something that's essentially a cyber weapon. It's one way or another made itself to the hands of these regimes that we in the Western world may not agree with. And it's being used to do some kind of, let's face it, creepy stuff, tracking people.
So I am going to say the following. Every government does creepy stuff. The question is, are you getting caught?
Right.
Are you getting caught?
Yep. And this was their turn.
Tucker Carlson, I didn't see that trending on Twitter worth of nothing. I didn't see it trending on Reddit. I didn't see it anywhere. No one cared because it was Tucker Carlson, right? And it was Fox, but it was just as bad, all right? Spying on a journalist, no matter what you use, is bad.
Agreed.
Can we agree to that?
I can absolutely agree to that. Yeah.
Brilliant. So now when we look at NSO's Pegasus product, and they're dealing with a bunch of different lawsuits because of the Jamal Khashoggi thing over a few years ago in the Saudi embassy in Istanbul, where the guy walked in and he miraculously never walked out. Or he did, but it was a body double, and then no one knows how he got out. Either way, right? Either or, we know that Pegasus was used by the Saudi government at that time to track what he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the deal. Most governments have backdoors into communications that's being done. For WhatsApp and Facebook give backdoors to almost every government in every nation they operate in. So this whole, to me, here's the thing. If we want to be upset over mass surveillance and surveillance on journalists, let us be mad over mass surveillance and surveillance of journalists and not the NSO group. The NSO group makes a tool, whether you like it or not. You don't have to buy it, right? You can go to your legislature and say, please outlaw the use of cyber tools against our citizens. And your legislature can go and pass that law. Now, whether that law is enforced, that's like letting a fox guard a hen house, right? It is. It's like, hey, government, make sure that it's illegal for you to spy on us. Oh, and by the way, government, if you do spy on us, you need to hold yourself accountable.
So let me ask you, what do you think of things like Amazon shutting down their AWS services for them over this?
For NSO?
Yeah.
I think they're gerrymandering. I think this is nothing but
Are they within their right to do that?
So I think the courts ruled this happened with what's the name of that social network in January? Parler.
Yeah, Parler.
Right? And the courts ruled at the time that Amazon was within its rights to take Parler off their cloud service because they're a private company.
Mm-hmm.
So as a private company, if I don't want to give you services, I'm entitled to not give you any more services. So if that's, AWS's call and that's what they want to do, that's fine. These guys are going to go somewhere else. And
I just want to see if that would spin you up or not. I mean, there's that big argument when it comes to stuff like this. It interests me just to know that AWS would be providing services for this group anyways, given what the group does, right? And the stuff
listen, cold medicine can be used to make meth, right? We limit how many cough syrups you can buy at a store because we say if you buy a large quantity, then maybe you're making meth.
Good stuff's behind the counter. Yep, you got to sign for it. Yeah.
But guess what? The stores still have the same quantity of cough medicine in stock. No one is going to Publix, right, or Kroger or any supermarket chain and go, stop selling cough medicine, stop selling cough medicine. They're not doing it, right? Like, I know it's funny, but you don't go after the company, and you don't go after the cough medicine manufacturer, right? Because here's the ugly truth about the NSO group and Pegasus. Here's one thing no one wants to take into account. That tool has probably saved thousands, if not hundreds or tens of thousands of lives since its inception by helping intelligence agencies identify threats and stop attacks before they took place. So just remember that for every one journalist that's being spied on, there's probably 150 scumbags that are sitting in jail today because of that Pegasus tool.
Okay, and so with respect to your cough syrup crossover there, which is damn funny, by the way, I did like that. I'm picturing people with signs, right? But the difference is, yes, the deal with this is that it is privacy related, and it is a huge violation in privacy when you start grabbing all their data off their phones and their texts and their emails and all that kind of stuff. That's a little different than than selling cough syrup, in my opinion.
Really? Okay.
I do. I think privacy. I believe privacy has.
Every single one of those reporters has a Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Microsoft, Google account, right? That's pretty much meaning all their data is being scraped at some point or another.
Well, from that side. But what about when they're talking to somebody who's giving them information, and that stuff's supposed to be confidential, right? You're supposed to be able to reach out to the media and hope, if you're doing this sort of thing, the expectation is you can reach out to a reporter and they're not going to rat you out necessarily to everybody if you provide information. I mean, the days of having the blurred faces and stuff are gone. I haven't seen one of those in a while. But you get the idea, right? You're supposed to be able to reach out to a journalist and say, hey, I need a whistleblow on this, and not worry about having all that.
I think
done.
If we had more blurred faces, people would believe the media more.
Fair enough.
Because when it's a blurred face speaking, you're able to tell the language and the emotion by which the speaker is speaking with, and therefore you're able to determine the authenticity of the specific reporter or whistleblower account that's coming to light, right? When we heard Snowden speak, had Snowden never come forward, if Snowden been an anonymous whistleblower, we may or may not have believed what came out of that report that Glenn Greenwald and the other reporters did in 2000, and I believe it was 14 or 13, right, with the Snowden thing. It was only when Snowden spoke, when we saw Snowden on camera, that we all took that account had more weight to it.
But you understand my point is not about Snowden or speaking. My point is that you're supposed to be able to.
But you don't have that privacy. It's not like that. But what I'm trying to tell you is that privacy doesn't exist anymore. We can't we can't in one word, right, or in one spot. And I love all these hypocrites that are on Twitter and Reddit right now and everyone else that's going out there. And I'm calling them out, and they can come at me and we'll take this debate any way they want to take it on. But here's the deal. In one way, they go, we have no privacy. We need to reclaim our privacy. But these same reporters, right, are on Twitter, they're on Reddit, they're on Google, they're on Microsoft, they're on all these different companies that mine and look at your data. They get these accounts on those social media networks. How many reporters get DM'd on Twitter? And you want to tell me Twitter isn't looking at their DMs? Of course they are. It's in their terms and conditions. So you don't really have privacy. It's just that Twitter isn't really going to expose who that is. But guess what? A government has a backdoor to Twitter. So if the government wanted to go in and see who your whistleblower is, they can just subpoena that from Twitter, and Twitter would supply all your DMs to the government, right? So this entitlement of privacy that we say NSO is violating your privacy, not really, because we don't have that privacy anymore. We don't. It's as simple as anything. If you put anything out there, if you're using any technology whatsoever, I think it was the president of Microsoft, Brad Smith, he himself said a few weeks ago in a congressional testimony that we get, 10 to 15 warrants a day asking from the government, asking to access Americans' cloud accounts online.
That doesn't surprise me.
So when you say that and this outrage over NSO, to me, Eric, it's misplaced.
I'm saying this is why it's a big deal. This is why it's got people up in arms, because people do still believe in privacy, honestly, and they hope to have some. Okay. And that's why I think it's such a big deal to people. It feels very clandestine, dirty. Oh, they're spying on these people. This is a PR thing as much as it is anything else. And that's what I'm trying to say here is this is that kind of stuff going on, right? It's a big deal, and it's going to make the news because it deals with privacy and because people get riled up about that. Whether we really have privacy or not, there is that thought that our privacy is something that needs to be, closely monitored and or protected. Okay. Now, whether or not that's true or not, this is why people are all riled up about the NSO thing in a lot of cases, because it feels dirty.
I can agree with what it feels like.
Right.
But I can agree with the feeling.
Yeah.
All right. I can't agree with the logic behind the outrage. I think the logic behind the outrage, if you look at it and you go, wow, the NSO was spying on you. Well, just last week, the DNC was asking phone companies to monitor your text messages and report any vaccine misinformation and not deliver those text messages on your devices. There was very little outrage about that. Okay. So the hypocrisy here to me is monumental in nature. All right. If you're going to be upset over anyone spying or anyone doing anything, be straight. But I think that's the challenge of why we can't make progress in security, right? We're so quick to go about and highlight a cyber offensive tool that in all reality has probably saved more lives than it took away.
Yeah, and in all honesty, if we don't think this stuff is going on, we're naive. And it's going on it's not just NSO. There's groups all over the place that create this kind of stuff. It's not just them. And so, if you want to be outraged at the idea, not necessarily that one organization. Maybe it's my military background or whatever, but I just kind of shrug and go, yeah, this has been going on forever. Like, this kind of stuff it doesn't surprise me the way it seems to surprise some people. But I have a little bit of background and seen some of that stuff. Like I said, I'm not outraged by it necessarily, but I see why people are. And the whole idea behind, yes, you should be able to go out to journalists, and just like with lawyers, that kind of stuff should be protected, right? Is it? That's a whole different story, but it should be. And in our minds, it should be that way. We should strive towards that protection if we can. Not NSO's fault. Again, just saying, this is one of those things that kind of violates one of those deals that some of us take pretty, I guess, personally.
And NSO's been at the crosshairs of a bunch of organizations for the last 3 to 5 years. This is just, I don't know if this is going to cripple them. I don't think it will. Because I think that here's the thing about AWS and all these other companies. They're all happy to take your money. They're all happy to give you the platform. They're all happy to do business with you until. And then when that until happens, then they go, well, we're going to try to take the moral high road. Now, this is the same company that operates sweatshops that I don't know if you've the stories from Amazon employees about the working conditions that they go through. Is it's always funny to me when I see everyone kind of try to take the high road against someone else rather than, identify the fact that they do business with us. We're entitled to do business with whoever we want, and we're entitled to not do business. I neither support nor deny AWS's position on this one because they're a private company. They can do whatever they want. I'm a private company. I can do whatever I want, right? You're a private company. You can do whatever you want. No one's requiring you, right, to do anything. I come at this from a different perspective, though, right? I come at this from the perspective of there's a level of private business and private enterprise and deals making, and then there's a position where we have to look at this NSO thing and go, if you're going to get outraged over them spying, then I want the same amount of outrage when the NSA spied on Tucker Carlson. I want the same outrage when social media companies get secret subpoenas from the federal government and don't notify you about it, and how FISA is being misused against American citizens, right? And if you're going to be outraged over all of that, then I want you to go and outlaw and demand that data brokers who have no relationship with you, who scrape the internet for all your data, be outlawed as well, because that's a privacy violation.
Yeah.
Right? So,
yeah, no. Well, one of my big problems with
is all I'm saying. Have an equal standard.
Yeah, no, I agree. And one of my big problems with the big social media companies is the amount of data that they're pulling and tracking and selling and doing all that kind of stuff. It's one of the reasons I don't like those big things. But it's part of, if you sign up for it, if you have a Facebook account, they're tracking what you're doing, right? And it can be downright creepy there too. We pulled into a car lot one time just to kind of look over the fence to see what we were, see what was out there. And lo and behold, before we get home, my wife's getting car dealership ads on her phone and Facebook. How does this happen? It's creepy. It's creepy. It's crazy creepy. But yeah, you're right. It's not just here. There's a lot of things that we should be considering. I think we're getting to the point that we're kind of, I don't know, just desensitized to some of that stuff. Honestly, something like this pops up and it's different.
I don't want to say desensitized. I want to say that there are greater powers highlighting the NSO deal than there are any other ones, because there's an interest. Because NSO's been at the headline of all of this stuff for the last 3 to 5 years. I could give you 3 reasons why I know, but it'll be pointless, right? Yeah. It'll be absolutely pointless, because people just be like, yeah, well, that's not really true. And at that point, we're arguing semantics. But the NSO started with a few people who did not like what the NSO was doing, because NSO wouldn't not sell to someone. So at that point, once they kind of went against the crowd and said, we're going to continue to do business with legitimate governments who our government allows us to export this technology to, people were like, well, now we're coming after you. And they're being sued, I think, in Israel. They're being sued in Cyprus, in the US, in Canada, in Europe. And NSO has been sued for a bunch of stuff. And, good for them for not bowing down, though. Right. Honestly, good for them. Don't apologize for doing business. Yeah.
I do think we are getting desensitized to our privacy, though. I really do. I mean, just even small places. And, it may seem silly, but here in my area here, we have an HOA. They put in a new gate system. It runs ALPR, automatic license plate recognition software, which then uploads places and all this kind of stuff. And of course, I was like, who's retaining this for how long? You're tracking when I go in my neighborhood through license plate stuff. You're taking videos and pictures at the front with this new gate system. To me, it just kind of felt a little bit, but when you bring it up to people, they're like, I don't care. I don't care if they know who comes and goes, when I come and go, when my kids come and go in the neighborhood. I don't care what they do. These people they just don't take it like that seriously. And then it's, another thing happened, that there was another breach. Look at the first time that back with a Target and like Home Depot, when those breaches happened, and it was like, oh my gosh, now you barely hear about crap like that on the news. Oh, look, another place dumped all of your information. You get another free run at credit monitoring software. And we go, okay, that's good. That's fun.
Can we all agree that credit monitoring software should just ultimately be free? Just perpetually free, right?
But the fact that they have credit, these credit systems play such a big job in our life, they should just provide that along with it, right? Yeah. But I mean, we've gotten to the point now where it's like, oh, it's just another thing. It's another thing. We are getting desensitized to our personal data being dumped. I mean, I'm at the point that it's like, oh, look, my name and email address is found in another breach. I go, have I been pwned? I'm like, oh, whatever. It's already been out there for 4 or 5 other breaches. Who cares, right? I'm getting that, that mentality when it comes to that.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think we've reached a point where we've reached at these, but I think part of it is just the fatigue, right?
Oh yeah.
It's the fatigue of a data breach. You go, I think after Equifax, 90% of Americans were like, I don't give a shit anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, I mean, the big kicker for me was when, basically all of my military clearance crap got dumped over to whomever, fingerprints, all my background, my parents' background, all that kind of stuff that I had to do to get my TS clearance. And all of that stuff was, oh, look, now it belongs to the Chinese, right? At that point, I'm like, there's just nothing else that anyone could possibly know about me, other than maybe my shoe size. I'm happy to tell you, okay. But ultimately, when I think about privacy stuff, my thoughts are not about me anymore. It's more about like my kids, who may or may not have already had all of their information dumped out there. We're at a point that we've been breached and our information put out there publicly so many times. It really doesn't matter for you and I anymore. I don't think it really doesn't.
No, both of us were victims of OPM, so I think we're even after OPM, we were A-okay. We just kind of understood that's part of the game, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
We're out of time. We're like 20 minutes over.
Oh yeah, this was a short one, wasn't it?
It was a short one, but we've gone over. And it doesn't really matter because I'm pretty sure folks enjoyed the last 30 minutes than they did the first 20.
Yeah. So,
all right, folks. Erich, how can people get in touch with you, buddy?
Twitter at Erich Kron. Yeah, I spell it real. I try to hide myself. LinkedIn, all that. I mean, look at my name. Look how it's spelled. It's easy to find me. That and I'm with KnowBe4, security awareness advocate there. So I do a lot of talks. I do, all kinds of. I'll be at Black Hat, DEF CON. You want to reach out and chat there? Happy to do that too.
Awesome, folks. Erich Kron, security awareness advocate over at the folks at KnowBe4, the kind, awesome, amazing people over at KnowBe4 who I absolutely enjoy working with and bringing on the show. You can catch more about him on social media, on LinkedIn, Erich Kron, and on Twitter. You're on Twitter, right?
Yeah, at Erich Kron.
At Erich Kron. And we'll have more Tech Corners coming up next week. Until then, thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great weekend, folks, and talk to you later. Cheers.
Make sure to subscribe to our podcast and share it with your friends and colleagues. And get all the latest information at cyberhubpodcast.com.